people come from all walks of life. They all have lives they lead. Any and all are welcome here to come and chat with me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Well, as you can see, I have two people with me today. Now, that's because one of them is my guest co-host. She is a really, really busy person, so I appreciate her taking time off to do this with me. She is my friend, Dr. Oh, I love saying I have a friend who's a doctor, by the way, Dr. Carin Bondar. Carin, thanks for doing this.
Hey, Nancy, thanks for having me. And I am just really excited that we have another person joining us for our conversation today. And that is our former mayor, and who really needs no introduction, Clint Hames. But did everyone actually also know that Clint is a very artistic individual? So in addition to being really in the political scene here in Chilliwack and in the know, he's also the president of the Chilliwack Players Guild, which maybe not everyone knows. And he's in a band called Judy Tuesday. Did you know that? He's the bass player. So there you go.
No, I'm not the bass player.
Oh, you're not the bass player?
No, just a guitar player. Just a guitar player.
Oh, okay. See, you have so much to shoot. Well, thanks for joining us, Clint.
You're very welcome. I just said that because if the bass player is watching, he'll think something's up, you know, that I've replaced
He'll be like, wait.
Yeah, wait a minute.
I have a question. How do you two know each other?
Well, that is a good question. How did we meet, Clint?
You know, I think the first time we met face to face was actually during the school board election, but I've been aware of Carin Bondar because she's a luminary, a local luminary in the community, and I've heard a lot of the work that Karen's done at UFE. I have a number of very close friends who work for or have recently retired from UFE, so certainly our names come up a number of times. But the actual face-to-face meeting, I think, first time was when I interviewed Carin.
For your brand new show.
Yeah.
That is called Hot Mic. I remember.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And congratulations on having that show, by the way. Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. We're very happy with it. It's we've just finished 8 episodes, and our viewership was in the stratosphere, and that was really exciting. Yeah, we had I think we had somewhere we averaged over 10,000 views for every episode we did, which when we're talking about network television, that's not very much. But when we're talking about shows that are of interest to local folks, I was quite pleased with that.
I would say, and what do you think? Oh, sorry, Nance, I want to know a couple things here. What do you think was such a secret to your success as far as, because those are huge numbers for a local political show, that's massive.
Well, I think what helped initially was the fact that we were in the middle of a fairly, you might know this, Carin, we were in the middle of a fairly contentious or controversial school board election. So a lot of folks tuned in to, you know, kind of see what these candidates were all about. There were no public all candidate meetings. So this is a real good opportunity for people. But I've also interviewed other political folks, our MLAs and the mayor, and recently the chair of the regional district board, and those shows are all getting big numbers too. So I guess people are just sort of saying, hey, there's lots of good information there. I think I'll watch. And, you know, social media is wonderful, right? You put something on Facebook and, you know, Karen's got 750 million friends and I've got about 700. But so, you know, once it goes up on Facebook, it seems to generate a lot of interest, which is great. It's the positive side of social media.
Right.
Agreed.
I want to know what I'm doing wrong because I'm not getting those numbers.
Well, just wait till after you have Carin and I on your show, it's probably going to just skyrocket.
I've had Carin on. I've had the mayor on twice. I've had Brian Minter on. I've had who else have I had? Something's wrong.
No way, nothing.
No, I think wait till there's a controversy and you have somebody on, then those numbers will go up.
That's what I think is really interesting, because something that I didn't realize before jumping into the foray was how, you know, how much local politics is something people really want to talk about. I mean, we are, you know, in this new information age, and people really have a lot of things to say. And I think maybe Clint's show is one of those ones that really gives them the opportunity to learn about, you know, the local ins and outs of who's doing what in politics. You know, things are quite changing out here in Chilliwack. So I guess
I think that there's it used to be, especially for local elections, there was a kind of a strata of the community that paid attention and voted. And that was often dismal in terms of total numbers. It could have been, I think the worst election I was involved in, the participation rate was about 20%. And that's really, really low. But then I think as we become a bigger city and there's bigger issues for people to talk about, it generates bigger numbers. Then I also think that, and I've said this for many years, that federal and provincial elections are easy for folks because there are labels on everybody. So you're an NDP, or you're a Liberal, or you're a Conservative. And so people don't really have to work hard at who to vote for, because they say, you know, I've always voted X, and so I'm just going to go and vote for whoever's beside, you know, whatever party. And so it's easier for folks. In local elections, you don't have that luxury. So you have this, I've got to pay attention. What do these people stand for? How do they fit with my political reality? And so it takes a lot of work to vote in a municipal election. However, more recently, there seems to be, in the school board election, I would suggest broke out this way, that there was a choice. I think there was what could be considered a more conservative candidate running, and could be considered a more progressive candidate running. So people were able to kind of use their labels, which made it easier for them and to some degree more accessible. So I used to think that having parties in municipal politics wasn't necessarily a good thing. I'm beginning to believe that it drives participation. So people can readily associate with a set of values and sort of know that everybody they vote for that has that label has those values. Hopefully they do, and they're able to kind of engage that way. So it'll be interesting to see. I think, you know, Surrey is certainly that way. Langley is kind of moving that way. Abbotsford, we never know quite what's happening in Abbotsford politically, it seems to be. And Chilliwack seems to be moving that way, that there's more of a kind of a party feel to local government.
That's really interesting. And I love how people are engaging locally on such another level, it seems like. And I wonder too, what your thoughts might be on the pandemic having impact on how much people are paying attention to local matters.
Good point, yeah.
Well, I think that like what we're doing, which is Zoom and social media, is playing a much bigger role in people's lives. You know, they're using computers and social media to communicate, where in the past they would have had other opportunities, and we're kind of locked in our little bubbles right now, and it's harder. And I think that allows us, when it's used in a good way, social media allows us to get at those issues in a very accessible way. You know, when I was involved in local government, you know, the newspaper was the place to get your, you know, like, how many ads are we going to be able to run this week? And I hope they're going to do an all candidates page. And, you know, that's how you were getting your message out. Well, that's not as easy as social media is today. And so I think, you know, we're all more accessible, and ideas are more accessible, and information is more accessible. And the candidates in the future who know how to use social media, or the theater guild that knows how to use social media to promote its productions, or the talk show that knows how to use social media to promote itself, is going to do really well. And one of the people I'm dying to interview on my show, because I think it's political, is I'd like to talk with Paul Henderson. And everybody knows Paul. He's the editor of the local newspaper. And I'd like to talk with him about that phenomenon, because I'd like to know, the newspaper's got to have a strategy how to maintain relevance in this kind of, you know, computer screen age. So I'd love to have that, have that conversation with Paul.
Yeah, good luck getting him on. I've invited him on to the show, and he said he's not a camera person. He'd rather do, you know, but I just getting back to the social media, I just want to add, for instance, though, I live in a building where people are like in their 70s and their 80s. They don't do Zoom. Some of them don't even have computers. They still rely very much on the paper. You know, the newspaper comes and they go down to the lobby and they get their newspaper, and that's, so it's still very important to have politics in the local paper. for
I
those.
agree. I
And we have
agree.
a lot of seniors here in Chilliwack, right? A lot of people are in their 70s and 80s and up, and they need that piece of paper.
But I'll give you another example, though. My wife's quite involved in what's now called the new Shamview United Church, which is an amalgamation of the 3 United Churches in Chilliwack. And the average age of the congregations is, they'd feel very comfortable in your building, Nancy. That's where that age is.
Yeah.
And they hold their Sunday morning worship service virtually on Zoom. And at first, it was, oh, how do I touch this? And now it's second nature to everyone, and they've really picked it up. So necessity is the mother of invention, and certainly these folks have been able to accommodate that kind of technology in their life, and I think that's great. And now that opens up another different world for those folks as well. There's the things you can learn online if you know where to look, the opportunities for higher education, for everything you could think of online. It opens it up for people who maybe previously thought, okay, well, I'm not going to go to a class. I'm not going to do this. So I'm pretty excited about that.
That actually reminds me, my mom recently had her first Zoom Quilting Guild meeting. My mom is a member of the Quilting Guild in Chilliwack, and she was a late adopter, Nancy. I know she's like, I don't get it. I don't see why we would bother doing that. But actually, when they had finally had their meeting, and she's like, we all just did our quilting in our homes, but together. Actually, she was a convert at that point. Yeah.
How exciting is that?
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I personally like it because I've got family everywhere, right? So I get to see my family in New Brunswick and Quebec, and I have family in Austria, unfortunately. Or I could do, my son in China, I could see him on social media too. So it is wonderful. It is a good way for people to stay connected, because we're so isolated otherwise, right now. I just want to ask you, like, how long ago was it when you were the mayor?
1904, I think. It feels far. I was my last term ended in December 2008.
So what did you do after that?
I still, up until even a couple of years ago, I owned a company that's still called Pacific Developmental Pathways, and Pathways existed to support adults with developmental disabilities.
Okay.
And we ran very specialized programs across the Fraser Valley, Langley, Surrey, Abbotsford, Mission, Chilliwack. And we had support plans for folks like that. So that was my company as well. During that same period of time, or for the last 20 years, I've been a consultant to the human services nonprofits and to that area. So I've done a lot of consulting work around the country, mostly in organizational development and strategic planning and those kind of things. So that's been a part of my life that I've continued on with, not so much in the last few years, because I'm sort of trying out this retirement thing, but I still love doing some of those things. And I think the most interesting thing that happened when I retired was I was asked to join the board of directors of the Canada Lands Company. And Canada Lands has a big footprint in Chilliwack, or did. They took over the old CFB Chilliwack lands and redeveloped it over the course of about, I think the last Canada Lands involvement was about 2 years ago. And I was on that board for 10 years. So not only did I get a chance to kind of work on this development, but we had development projects in Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, a whole bunch of development that we were doing in Toronto, as well as we owned the CN Tower in Toronto. So it was really exciting to be a part of that sort of tourism infrastructure as well. And in Montreal, we owned what's called the Old Port of Montreal, which is all the waterfront area in downtown Montreal, was a project that we owned, and the Montreal Science Center, which was part of our portfolio. So, and then projects in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So I got to travel the country, and a lot of the work I did with the board was as the chair of what was called the investment committee. So we would look at all of the strategic investments the company was going to make, and then bring back recommendations to the board and say, this is a good project, this is not a good project. And then we would work with the board to say, okay, let's this, or, we should accelerate this or decelerate this. And it was a crown corporation, but it was what's called a non-agent crown, which means it had to generate all its own money. So we would literally buy property from the federal government when the federal government had surplus property. We would buy property from the federal government and then redevelop it. And then our profits would go back to the federal government in the form of dividends. So over the time that I was on the board, we were involved in literally billions of dollars of redevelopment of the country on former federal lands. And the nice thing was our mandate wasn't just make money. Our mandate, in fact, was create something wonderful that the private sector wouldn't necessarily do. And Garrison Crossing in Chilliwack is an example of that. A normal developer would have come in and said, mow down the trees, put one kind of housing in there and then move on. And we said, no, we're going to do a development that keeps as much of the natural landscape as possible and also has a mix of housing types. I feel very strongly that neighborhoods should be a blend of all kinds of different housing. And that's what we have in Garrison, along with a lovely village center and all of those other things. And it happens to be where I live. So when I came to Chilliwack as a young child, my father was in the military. So I'm living in a house that's about a half a block from where the first house we lived in as a kid. So I did that for about 10 years. And that was some pretty amazing work. And I had such a great opportunity to travel across the country. There were representatives from BC on the board. I was the BC representative, the Prairies, 2 from Ontario, and 1 from Montreal, and 1 from Eastern Canada. So we had a chance to have a lot of fun doing that.
Sounds like an amazing project. And that Garrison was like part of it. That's such a cherry on top, really.
Yeah, and if you go to Calgary, there's an area of Calgary south of the town center called Garrison Woods and Curry Barracks, it's called, and those are both projects that Canada Lands did. In Edmonton, there's a project called the Village at Griesba, which is a 640 hectare development of the old military base in Edmonton. Of the 3, Garrison is by far the nicest and most beautiful, but they are just stellar developments. And one of the, and I don't mean to go on and on about this, but one of the more interesting parts of that work was in Vancouver, there's property that you might know called the Jericho lands. And the Jericho lands were a joint federal and provincial piece of property where there was a military base and there was some waterfront property which became a park. But at the time that we acquired the Jericho lands as Canada Lands, we also worked with 3 First Nations in Vancouver, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish. And we entered into a partnership with them to redevelop those lands as a way of kind of acknowledging their right and title to some of that property as well, because it was surplus federal property. So the property that's there now is being planned in a joint way. And I believe the thought is the First Nations would like to take the whole property over in the end and be part of a legacy that the province and the federal government is giving to them. And that was pretty exciting. But getting anything done in Vancouver is not like anywhere else in the world. It takes years. I was working on that project, and that would have been 7 years ago. We started that. So, and there still isn't development happening, but it just takes a while to get things done there.
Yeah, that's right on the beach, hey, right at the UBC endowment lands there.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, the portion that Canada Lands and the MST partnership are working on is everything sort of north of 4th Avenue. The south of 4th Avenue is all the park that was created years ago. So it's a pretty exciting project. I mean, you've got, I forget how many acres it is, 80 or 90 acres in the middle of Metro Vancouver. Yeah. That is basically blank slate. So it's pretty exciting.
But just wondering, like, talk about exciting, well, all these exciting changes that are happening here in Chilliwack, do you ever get the itch to get back into the politics?
Yeah, there was so much wonderful about being involved in local government. And Carin, you've got a wonderful future ahead of you to kind of be able to have an idea, present it, and then see it happen. And there's nothing more exciting. Like provincial and federal government being involved at that level isn't quite as exciting to me, because you can have all the ideas you want, but in local government, you got 6 other people you have to convince. If you're in a provincial government or federal government, it's hundreds of people you've got to kind of get your ideas through. It's so much harder to get things done. So I miss that aspect of local government very much, that we could sit down as a council and say, okay, what do we want to do? And council would say, well, let's build this, or let's pave that, or let's put water here, or let's build trails or sports fields. And 6 months later, you're watching shovels do the things you wanted to do. And it's very powerful and very exciting. So I miss that part of it. I don't miss the part of it where you lose who you are. I stopped being Clint and I became the mayor. And so you lose a piece of who you are, and you become that character instead of the person. And it's hard. It's really hard on you, because you're never not the mayor. So you can go out with your family for dinner and people want to have a chat with you about something, or even your friends think of you as the mayor, not the person, right? So it kind of, for me, I had a list of things I wanted to do. I figured it would take 9 years, 3 terms. Their terms were 3 years then. I figured that's what it would take. And then I wasn't going to start a new list. I just wanted to get out. So that's what I did. I retired, and rather than get beat, you never want to lose an election. So I just decided I'd had enough. As far as the rest of it goes, and I say this all the time, what our country needs in terms of leadership, the last thing it needs is another old white guy in government. And I mean that so sincerely, because my view and my orientation and my background is well represented in government. There are a whole lot of other people who aren't represented by our governments, and they need a voice. And to really begin to grow as a country, we need to be encouraging those voices to be in our government. While it would be fun, and I probably have enough profile where I could make a good run at one of those jobs, I'm just so delighted when I see people that represent a broader diversity in our community taking on those jobs. So I encourage people to do that, but it's, boy, it takes a lot of energy.
Thank you.
I love the things I'm doing right now with the travel I get to do, and I love the things I'm doing with music and theater and family, and so it would take an awful lot to have to pry me away from that.
Well, we're just about out of sorry, Carin. We're just about out of time.
What a beautiful thing to say from such a person of stature in our community. Thank you for sharing that, Clint.
Oh, you're welcome. I feel very strongly about that. And I have 2 grown daughters who constantly remind me that that's how I should think. And I feel very fortunate that they keep me on the straight and narrow in that regard.
Good for them. Good for them, and good for you. Well, we're just about out of time, but I just want to show people that Clint wasn't just a mayor. He was also a fun guy. Can you see this photo?
What are you doing?
When he was the mayor, those are actually rabbit ears that he has all out of shape there. But that was way back.
Elton John glasses. Love it. Lots of I have a quick question for both of you before we end up, because you both have talk shows now. Now, Clint, you said that you wanted Paul Henderson, so I will accept that. But I also want to know just dream guests for each of you guys. Who would you both like to get in your hot seat? Like, 1, you could do a local person, and then 2, anybody. What if it was anybody you could just get them?
I'm trying to get Dr. Henry.
Oh, Bonnie Henry, nice.
Yes, I would love to have her on my show.
Great, yeah.
Controversy. I'm not controversial, but I would really love to have her on the show.
She'd be an amazing guest. That's a good one. How about you, Clint?
One of the people that I'm very interested in chatting with, and this is local, there would be, like, I'd pick somebody like Eric Clapton to be, or somebody like that. But locally, a guy that I'm very interested in chatting with and am going to be chatting with is Louis Diager, because Louis is involved in such neat stuff. I mean, not only is he a former downtown Chilliwack businessman, not only was he involved in running a political campaign, he's also involved now in the Métis Association provincially as their Minister of Economic Development. And I'm just fascinated about what sort of aspects of Métis, how is that going to integrate into kind of the framework of Aboriginal rights and title within the province? And I'm excited about talking with him about that. So there you go.
I would like to, that's another thing. I would like to introduce somebody who's Aborigine, and I don't know, I have no connections, and the few I did have Stephen Point on the show at one time. It was wonderful to have him.
Okay.
But I would really like to have more Indigenous people on the show, and they tend to be a little bit more quiet, the ones that I know. You know what I mean? They're a little bit more.
We've got to get you some guests that want to come on and
yes, because I'm really passionate about them getting all the rights that they should have, that you know, all of those things all of the bad that had been done to them should be out in front. And there's so many people who have a prejudice against them, their points of view about like they're all this or they're all that. And I would love to have an Aboriginal person talk about to dispel those myths, those things that people believe. It would be wonderful for me if I.
Well, I think the growth in the relationship in the Indigenous culture in Chilliwack and local government and the local community is really exciting. And some of the things you see happening around the community as economic development is being driven now in this community in many, many places by developments that are on traditional Indigenous lands for the benefit of those First Nations. And so it's exciting. I'd like to talk about what their aspirations are, because we don't have any land left in Chilliwack that is developable, and yet most of the planet seems to want to come and live here. So how do we accommodate that? And one of the ways is going to be with intelligent development and some of the land that is available, and some of that is Indigenous lands. And you know, how do we integrate modern planning concepts and those kind of things, and integrate our transportation networks and integrate our infrastructure in a way that really makes sense. So that's going to be interesting as well.
Yeah. All sounds wonderful. Well, that's it. Listen, I want to thank both of you. Carin, thank you so much for being my co-host. I really appreciate that. What I liked is we had totally different questions to ask, so it was really perfect. And Clint, thanks again for doing that. What's the name of your show? Just put it out there again.
Do you know what it's called? Hames Hot Mic.
Nice.
Okay,
and next episode.
It airs on Thursday nights. Each episode is released on Thursdays at 5 o'clock, I believe. Okay. And I think that Jason Lum is this Friday. So as the chair of the Fraser Valley Regional District. So and new Papa as well. So that'll be fun.
Wonderful.
And then we'll have to get Carin back as well to talk about her experience on the school board, because I'm fascinated to find out how that's going.
Right? So far it's busy, but I swear once I get my feet on the ground.
You'll do awesome. Okay, well, thanks again, you two. And thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Stay safe. In the meantime, peace out, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see.